Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Jedrick. I am here with Red Rudder. You are listening to the Aviation Business Podcast. We have a special guest today, Randy Taussig. He is part of a big program called EOS. We've talked about this before in some of our webinars. It's a continuous improvement system for small businesses to really grow and scale their businesses and really escape the cycle of banging your head on the wall if you're a small business owner. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you are a business owner. I'm not going to give a full introduction. I'll let kind of Randy talk about himself for a little minute. But we are pleased and honored to have Randy on our show. Welcome to the Aviation Business Podcast. Let's get a round of applause.
Hey, I heard that. That's great applause. Good to see you, Tim. I'm looking forward to this conversation. There's two things that I'm passionate about: aviation and business. So this is a nice combo.
Definitely. So I know we kind of found you through the EOS cycle. One of my team members he had learned about EOS in college, actually, in university. Started reaching out, and we were always looking for guests to go on our show. And then we kind of got linked up with you, and then surprisingly, there's a bit of an aviation background too, which was a really great, kind of mesh for this podcast, our audience, and who we talk to. Maybe really quickly, can you give us a quick story of what's your career? Where did you start from? Where did you go? How did you get involved in aviation? How did you get involved with EOS? And then later we can talk about what EOS is.
Man, that's a lot of questions. But I think it's all basically just where did it start and where are we now? But no, that's great. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
I would say it all started where I had a lineage of this entrepreneurial blood. My great-great-grandfather started two bakeries down in Washington, D.C. in 1860, and those bakeries, they morphed into a sugar refining molasses business, became then a multi-million-dollar business, became then a publicly traded business, and then became something that was sold. I joined the business when it actually was a food ingredient company right out of college. And I got exposed to all the different facets of business. I was very lucky. I got into every one of the main, pieces of a business. And I'll tell you what happened. The company at that point was, a larger corporation. But that's when I got a connection to the smaller growing companies, because when I joined the company, they were growing through acquisition. They were buying a lot of smaller businesses, many of them family owned, in the food ingredient arena. And what I realized is that's where the energy is. That's where I thought the excitement was. And even though in the industry, it wasn't maybe the sexiest industry, these were entrepreneurs, people that were creating something on their own, building value. And I never looked back. So I was working in that company environment. I've had experience in larger companies, but I truly have my heart in the growing entrepreneurial businesses. Fast forward, a friend that I knew actually that was in came to one of the workshops I did when I had a consulting business. He was one of the first people in EOS, and he talked about this book Traction, and he said, "I just love this thing. It's such a great," and he just wanted to expose me to it. And I wasn't ready at that point, but a little over a year later, I decided to what they call burn the boats and say, "Okay, I'm going to go 100% in this." I felt like it was the right place for me. EOS at that point, when I joined officially, there were less than 40 EOS implementers. I think this year they're probably going to top about 1,000 worldwide. It's amazing how this business has grown. The value of this business is really because it's the system itself is simple, it's straightforward, it's powerful, and it's not easy, meaning that it makes sense. You and I were talking a little bit about it. There's these elements of your business like, okay, that makes sense, but then being able to implement it and execute it becomes a different thing. And of course, that's a path for those of us that are in this position where we help our clients grow and we're implementing EOS. And that's the main thing that I have been doing. That was 13 years ago that I joined EOS, and here I am now. My business, Blue Core Leadership, has the bread and butter of EOS implementations. We also do one-on-one coaching for the C-suite, and we've just launched yesterday a mid-managers program that is being delivered online, but it's a hybrid with group coaching and some personal aspects of it. But it's to help mid-managers build confidence and competence as they're moving forward. And it's a very important thing for the companies that I work with because when you're growing, guess what? You need good people to be able to manage the human capital in the business. So that's not the fastest way to get to your question, but you had a long question anyhow, so I just gave you a long answer.
Oh, that's good. I mean, the whole question is, it's an introduction, right? So we just want to know who
Yeah.
you are, what you do. You kind of talked about what EOS is, but we're going to dive into the EOS program pretty shortly. Another kind of question I had, part of the intro, was also your aviation background. So I think there was some aviation stuff mixed in there too, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, so not professionally, but I've always been an avid pilot, and I found a way early in my career to convince my company to allow me to fly for business. So for 5 years, I was in the sales and marketing arena, we had some key accounts, primarily in the pharmaceutical industry. And it's a long story in terms of how the timing was where I convinced the company to allow me to fly for business, but I really pulled off a coup because I was renting airplanes at that time. And for 5 years, I had my flying paid for. It was great. But, and fast forward with my company now, always wanted to have a way to utilize aviation as a true business tool. And it is. I have most of my clients up in the Northern Virginia area. They've been spread out. I'm in Florida right now. I have a Cirrus. It's right behind me. The real one's a little bigger, but I use that as a true business tool, and so have a love for aviation, and not just because I like to fly, but I also see the value of it in a business environment. So I've been lucky to be able to connect two very big passions, business and aviation. So that's my connection with aviation.
I think me and you are probably the lucky ones in the community because we both use aviation for business, and we it's a little different model. We're not airline pilots, but I'm a pilot as well. And then we fly. Me and some team members, we go out and fly to visit customers and prospects and do video recording stuff. So um different take on how to get into the aviation community. You don't have to go to the airlines. You can do marketing, you can do sales, you can do other options there. You can start a flight school, maintenance shop, FBO. There's so many different opportunities in this industry, which is why we're so happy to be here. We're so happy to work with all the schools and all the aviation businesses. And I do think that for these businesses, a lot of them don't have the acumen or the knowledge really of how to grow and scale their businesses. And I think if it wasn't for EOS, we Red Rudder wouldn't be where we are today. And there's a lot of things that went into Red Rudder to make it the company that is like where it is today, where we have schools all over the country. We're on basically every single social media platform. A lot of schools already know who we are. We wouldn't be in our position without EOS. Um,
Yeah, and the beauty of that is it's your vision. So EOS didn't create your vision, and the thing that I love so much about it is that people like you have some really good concepts, and you got a passion, right? You want to bring that to the world, and then this silly thing around the basics of running a business and having a structure that will support you and making some hard decisions along the way, especially as you're successful, right? The success is what breeds the complexity. But you have a vision, and that's what I love about EOS because it's there to support a vision. It's there to put reality to a vision. A vision isn't really much if it's just in your head. It's about really executing on a good vision, and that's when great things happen. And EOS definitely has this huge place in helping businesses with that.
Well, what I like about it is it's primarily a framework, right? It's a framework or philosophy of thinking of how to run a business, and a lot of it's rooted in what's called continuous improvement. So you mentioned before you were in food manufacturing. And to be honest with you, my entire career before I got into marketing and aviation was in food manufacturing. So I used to work for Tyson and ADM and ConAgra. I used to work with the big conglomerates over here. And I took a lot of the knowledge from continuous improvement. They didn't call it EOS. They called it something different. They called it, black belt or Six Sigma black belt, or they called it, lean. That's another kind of system. TPS, Toyota Production System. And they have a lot of these concepts of how they run their business, Fortune 500, multi-billion dollar companies. And I took kind of that knowledge and I brought it to my company. And then when I came across traction, I'm like, oh, this is this exact same thing, but more suited for a company of my size. A lot of the things that we talk about, one of the I guess components of EOS is KPIs and data, right? One of the things we used to do in the factory, we'd have daily huddles. We'd go over KPIs, daily metrics. We'd go over the labor cost, the cost of production, units per minute, operational efficiency. We would go through these numbers daily, and I brought the same type of metrics, or same type of philosophy in my company. So for us, on a daily basis, we're looking at number of leads that came in. We're looking at our revenue. We're looking at our balance sheet, our P&L. We're looking at client satisfaction, things like that. And I think that's a really core part of how we run our business. And it wouldn't be if it wasn't for EOS and also my prior training and working in the manufacturing industry, I wouldn't have that kind of framework available, right? So let's maybe kind of move on to go into the EOS model. What is the EOS model, and who is it best suited? Who is it best kind of suited for? We'll start with that.
Yeah, so it's a model that has 6 key components that, when you go and implement it, you're working to get these components as strong as they can. You got a vision component, people component, data component, issues component, process, and then traction. All of them have tools that are connected to it, but the whole point is that EOS is there to build a structure and disciplines and accountability into an organization. And so, what I love so much about it is it's holistic. You named a lot of things that are out there that are very sophisticated. There it is. There it is. You came prepared. Yeah, and so when someone does an EOS implementation or goes through it, their job is to understand what each of these components looks like when they're really powerful and strong and supporting the business in its success. And there's tools and disciplines, and it's a journey. And in this journey, organizations learn to have the disciplines that will sustain their success. And I can I'm sure that you have, in the stages that you've been in your business, have found that EOS has helped you stay focused, but also has put in front of you probably some hard decisions. This is why I say it's pretty straightforward and it's powerful, and it's not easy because there's points where we say, "Oh crap, that stuff's coming up to the surface. That's real stuff that I have to deal with. Those are issues." And we find out, how do we get issues truly resolved and not play around with them, get into what the root is, get them solved. And then when you get them solved, you're making decisions moving forward and you're able to support the true path that the organization can be on. It is for the leadership team. So when we do an EOS implementation, we are first looking at saying, who is your leadership team? And it's interesting. Sometimes that's an interesting question, because we're not asking who is it that you necessarily trust, which is usually what a leadership team is, but who is it that holistically owns all the moving parts in the business? And through that, everything happens. And once EOS then starts getting implemented at the leadership level, it goes 100% through the whole organization. A typical um, journey with a professional implementer is about 2 years. So typically, when you go through it and you get a professional implementation, you're with an implementer for 2 years. But this is put in place specifically so the business owners and the leaders can be independent. It's your system. Once you know it and understand it, use it all you can, leverage your success. And that's another part that I just love so much about this. We're not setting our clients up to have this dependence for their whole, the whole life of the business.
Yep. Um, so part of what you do is you kind of come in as an EOS implementer, and you, I guess, take this framework and you implement it in a business, and it takes, you said, 2 years to fully implement. Can you walk us through like what's kind of the customer journey or a business owner's journey with if they choose to implement EOS? How does that, what's a typical like cycle or typical like kind of timeline, and kind of what happens in those 2 years?
Yeah, so those 2 years, you might say, geez, that's a long time. Companies start getting traction right away. It's amazing how you can start to get real value immediately. When someone like me comes in, we've got three roles. One is that we're coming in to teach this system because we understand as a system the power is utilizing and leveraging it and not tearing it apart. It's a system for a reason. There aren't pieces to take and say, I'll take this, but I'll leave that for later. You got to put it all together because that's how this is so powerful. So we're teaching the system, we're facilitating teams to be able to get to those hard places and decisions so they're utilizing the system. And ultimately, as we're really starting to get some traction with our clients, we're coaching. That's my favorite part, where I'm helping my clients be their best and I'm pushing them to be their best. To me, that's the most satisfaction. But we start with some foundational tools that really are there to support the traction side of the business. Then we move into making sure that there's a clear vision. There's a tool that you're familiar with called the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer. And that's this nice little executive summary and basically saying, this is our vision and this is the traction behind it. And we need to stay true to it and make sure we're doing everything to support it. And so it's a cycle. Once we get through this, the base tools and foundational tools and get some momentum going, then we're meeting with our clients on a quarterly basis and we're having quarterly all day sessions and we do 2-day annuals to get them reset for the year. And at some point, then they're ready to graduate, do it on their own. And we're always here as a support. But when that time comes, it's a great time because that means that they got where they need to go and they've got the system to get them there.
Let's talk a little bit about the system in detail. So we kind of you mentioned a few things in there that probably some of the people in the audience might shake their heads at. So one of the things you mentioned is a VTO. So VTO stands for Vision Traction Organizer. But I think even before you get to the VTO, you kind of got to break down the system because the VTO is encompassing of many different parts of EOS, right? It
Well, the
kind of
VTO is the vision, so just think of EOS as vision and traction. I mean,
vision and
those are the
traction.
2 things. It's like vision on the top, traction on the bottom, and everything in between that needs to happen to make it happen. And so, we say this, and I'm sure you've heard it, vision without traction is hallucination. It is absolutely true, right? Because we could have the greatest ideas in the world, but if we don't have true traction behind it, what good is it? It's just frustrating. So, yes, so the VTO is sort of that North Star and say, this is where we said we're going, right? This is what we said we can achieve. Yeah. Okay. What are the barriers there? What do we need to do to get there? How do we build the traction? This happens, obviously people are a big piece of it. Our systems are a big piece of it. So I'm sure that your listeners, those that are, I think most of them are FBO owners, or they're essentially in this space of aviation, right? They have a business and they're delivering value, and they've got to do that where they make a profit, and they've got people and they've got systems and all that. EOS is just helping put all those resources together to leverage your success and to really extract the barriers as soon as possible and to get real about if that's a barrier, we can't ignore it. Okay, it's a barrier. A lot of barriers sometimes are people issues. We don't have the right people in the right seats, right? That's a tough one because we may love the people, but if we haven't set them up for success and they're not in the right seat in the organization to be able to get the ultimate success that we're looking for, then we're going to have a miss. So that's an example of how this system comes together. But you're right. The VTO is sort of that big picture thing, and then you've got all these components that are supporting that, like the accountability chart. You use the accountability chart, I'm sure, and it's different than an org chart, and it's very powerful because it gives real clarity to the structure you need to support your success.
Yeah, actually, that's good. That's a good segue. So we're talking about different components about the EOS system. We kind of covered a little bit about vision. Um, Vision's really kind of if you're the business owner, ideally you're the visionary, right? That's kind of where or I'm going to lead us to. But we need to have an accountability chart of who's responsible for what. So you kind of brought up this cool concept that this was new to me when I first started it. It's called right people in the right seats. What does that actually mean? So, like for example, let me tell you a story. So when we first started up, we were really small. We were a small company, and family started getting involved. So my father was involved with the company for a bit, and then he wanted to employ his brother and his uncle, or my uncle, and his uncle, and then my other uncle. He wants to employ all these people. So I said, okay, let's try it out. Um, I don't think I implemented EOS at the time, but they were not the right people. and they were definitely not in the right seat. So we had to have some hard conversations in order to move the business forward, because if we were to try to make it work, we would have stagnated and been kind of stuck in a loop, right? So can you explain what right people, right seats mean, and and also what an accountability chart is, and how this kind of fits into the bigger picture for running a business?
Yeah, yeah. So, very simply, right people are people that fit your culture. And what we do on the VTO, the first section on the vision side is the core values. So we're basically saying, hey, we want people that are our people that just have same values, and that we're not looking for clones. We're just looking for people who have, same value, very similar values that you feel like you're in the right space together. And that has nothing to do with their ability to do the work. The right seat is taking people like that and putting them in the seats in the organization that need to be strong to support the overall success of the organization. The accountability chart is just a culmination of seats. Same thing as their functions. And what I love about it when we do this purely is that we take away titles, not because we don't think people should have titles, but titles sometimes get confusing. And our human brain it sort of becomes a little bit of the ego gets in there. And we're just saying, hey, what is the function? So it may be simply, I own sales. And there's 3 to 7 top priorities that we say that in terms of outcomes that we're looking for in sales. I own that. And so accountability chart really drives towards ownership as opposed to tasks, doing things. It's really about if you own sales, and if I own sales, for example, and we've got sales goals, guess who ultimately owns where we are with those sales goals? Even though there's a bunch of people that are part of being able to support that sales success. One person owns that sales outcomes, and so has to be in a position where looking out for the company and saying, what are we doing to make sure we're getting where we need to go, and making some hard decisions. So can you imagine all these seats come together to make a accountability chart? It may look like an organizational chart, but it's different because it's all based upon functions that have clear outcomes you're looking for and ownership within that, and therefore the accountability to support the success. I'll say this, and I tell this to clients in the 13 years I've been doing this, we have a lot of really great tools in EOS. Accountability chart to me is the best. It's the most honest. If we are really going to look at it and ask us to tell us what's going on, it will tell us. We just have to decide whether we listen or not. In your case, and I saw this as well as I was earlier in my career, where a lot of the companies were family run. It's a little harder because you've got family in there, and it's hard to say, hey, uncle, or, you're not in the right seat. It's like, well, who you tell me that I'm not in the right seat? Well, it's not me. It's like the organization needs this and you're giving that. You're just, you may not be the right person in the right seat. And so we have to have that sort of objective and subjective conversations for the greater good of the organization and to support the success of the company.
Let's kind of break down some of the key roles or key seats in a company. You mentioned vision. So I think a lot of people don't really have a visionary seat. They kind of have like, oh, I'm the managing director, or I'm the owner founder. But there's also another role that's on top of there too, called the integrator or implementer, right? What's the difference?
Integrator.
Integrator. So what's the
Everybody gets that confused too because I'm the implementer. Don't take my
oh,
job.
you're the implementer, I'm the integrator. Just to break it down, I'm already gonna skip ahead too. So normally most companies have 3 different departments. You have sales, marketing is the kind of the other department. You have your client delivery or operations. So for a flight school, this would be your CFIs, it'd be your maintenance department, things like that. And then you have your HR, admin, finance. So there's 3 main departments. Then there's kind of on the top, there's kind of this senior visionary integrator role, right? So me as the owner of Red Rudder Marketing, I am the visionary of it because I'm kind of providing, hey, this is where I want to take this company in the next 1 year, 3 year, 5 or 10 years. But then there's also another role that is the person that I guess gets the stuff done, right? So, but these two can be separate roles. Am
Yeah,
I
and they
am I saying this right,
usually
or I don't know if I'm saying this right?
no, you're saying it right. So usually they are, because if you're truly the visionary, and typically the founder is the visionary, and we look at where is your biggest value for the future of the business. So typically a visionary, their value is that vision, and the energy around what's possible and where this business is going. And so what's recognized there is that visionaries a lot of times get in their own way. They're not great at execution. They may be good at it, but as the company grows, they start getting in the way with good execution. And it's to recognize that you want a visionary to be free to be able to clear the path for the company to be able to get where it needs to go, and then have somebody else that is in the integrator or integration seat whose ultimate responsibility is execution. So the execution seat, whereas like we've got a business plan, we have a model, here's where we say we need to go. They're responsible for making sure it happens. And so the idea is that visionaries and integrators have a good relationship. Sometimes that's easier said than done, because a lot of times it's different personalities, and sometimes someone is an integrator and visionary. So what we'll typically do is just we'll call it out that there's an integration seat and there's some vision inside the integration seat. But in most businesses, there's a separate seat, visionary and integrator, and there are separate people in the visionary and integrator seat. Then all the main functions, the ones you talked about, sales and marketing, finance, I think you said finance and HR,
Yeah, finance,
and
admin,
operations.
HR. Yeah,
Yeah, and so those
legal.
three seats are typically usually it's sales, marketing, finance, and operations. You've said it in a different way, but that's what it is. And typically those are the three seats that are always the main functions of the business. And there could be more, but at least every business starts with that. And then every other seat connects to those main seats. So now what we're doing is we're building out an accountability chart, and there are people inside those seats that own those responsibilities. And when we're doing a really good job, we've got the right people in the right seats being able to get the right results.
So, for the going back to the integrator and
So
visionary,
you're the visionary, right?
I am the visionary, and I'm still the integrator in our
Yeah.
company. So, I
And
mean,
you may be getting in the way. I don't know.
I've tried over the past couple of years to slowly let go of the reins and give it to more people. So it's a process, right? So
It is a process.
I try to do it right away. You can't just rip the Band-Aid off and the hope
You
for
cannot.
you have to kind of build the system up month after month, year after year. And I'm not anywhere near, I don't think, to full implementation of EOS. I'm like baby steps right now. I'm like baby step number 2 probably. There is, by the way, I do recommend. So we mentioned this book multiple times. Traction by Gino Wickman is kind of the how-to guide of how to implement EOS in your company. So I read this book. It's life changing. And what I bring it up is because in the very first chapter or second chapter, there's a quiz. There's a quiz that says, are you doing this? Do you have SOPs that are written out with instructions for any team member to hop in and go in? Do you have an accountability chart built out? Does your senior leadership team meet on a quarterly basis to set the direction of the team? These are types of questions they ask you, and then they rate you a score, and then how well you score is basically how well you've implemented this system.
That's right.
I bring this up because I'm not anywhere near an expert in EOS, but I've tried to implement it in my system, and it's implemented in my business, and it has seen good return. Going back on the visionary and implementer roles, usually the CEO is kind of like, or the founder is like the visionary, and then like a COO or director of operations, I guess if you want to put titles to it, would be the integrators. That's correct. Like
That is, that's typical, right? And every once in a while, that is not the case. I've had cases where, and this is a whole other conversation, but we talk about how ownership, literal ownership, is independent from accountability on the accountability chart. It's possible to have an owner that's not even on the leadership team. It's possible if your ego doesn't get in your way. And I've had situations where that has happened and it's worked, where someone was really good in a one function that wasn't even at the leadership level, but as they got in the right seat and were able to perform the way that they want to perform, they were great. And by the way, they're owners. So they're getting the benefit of a company that's being successful. But most cases, the founder is typically a visionary seat. That's just the personality that's there. And then someone that's an integrator will be typically that operations type of person. But it's not always the director of operations, because an integrator has to have a lot of different skills to bring it all together. It's not just about focus on operations is about making sure all these seats come together, working well, and they're helping the owners of the main functions do excel. And so integrator seat is it's a difficult seat. You're doing both. And at this point, it's working, but I get a sense from the conversations I've had with you, some of it is not. And you're trying to figure a way of how do we get this divided a little bit better so you could really accelerate the company as the visionary and have the confidence to have somebody that really is growing into the integrator seat. Because as you said, you're not pulling off a band-aid and everything's great. It's an evolution,
Yeah.
and it fits within your culture, which is your core values that drive that.
Yeah. What I like about the whole having a middle kind of implementer there is like it's you have to be able to trust this person. So I think one of the biggest challenges we have as business owners is, especially if you're the like founder or like the first one in the group, it's really letting go of the reins. And I've seen this happen with not just my company but other businesses as well. Like they're afraid to give the responsibility and the trust to their team, and that's what holds them back. And then what happens is the owner of the company is just working like 50-hour days to get everything done because he doesn't trust his team, but he pays the team to do it, which is scary. Don't fall in that trap. Trust
Yeah,
your
don't
team,
fall in
build
that.
the team, hire the right people first off. So there should be a process of hiring the right people. That way you get the right people in the right seats. That way you can actually trust these people, right?
Yeah, and I'll say this, that, it's absolutely understandable why it's hard to let go. We call it letting go of the vine, because it's your baby. You've figured it out. It's been successful. You know a lot. You've done a lot, and there have been more successes than not. And now you're saying you're going to give the reins to a lot of that to somebody else. And that in itself is a challenge. Here's the thing that I would want people to hear. You must figure out how to do that. That doesn't mean it's easy to do, and it doesn't mean it's like there's something wrong with you because you're not doing it. But you must figure that out. If you don't, you are holding back your company. And you need to look in the mirror and say, I'm holding back my company. What am I going to do about that? Right?
Sometimes, yeah, I do think that us as the owners of the business, we're usually the number one bottleneck. I mean, like, I've gotten pretty well with trusting my team to take care of a lot of stuff, and what I'm finding is a lot of that overdue items that are on our project management software. That's it's all my items, so it's all my.
That's a problem, and then part of it is how much are you the one that's creating that problem? Like, you're making it hard for others to take some of those things or to be accountable for it. But that's the right challenge, and that's a great indicator for you too, by the way. Over time, how much of those things in the project management are now shifting to someone else legitimately, and they're taking care of it. And that's a great metric. That'd be a great metric to be able to see how you're doing on letting go of the vine.
I don't know how to record that, but I will say when we first started out, we had maybe one. I was just me by myself. I mean, I was doing everything. I did the website. We
Course.
do marketing, right? So I do the website, do the Google ad campaign, do the backlinks, do the directory listings, do the monthly calls with the customers, preparing slides and KPIs. Slowly giving this to the team. So, but there's still other action items that only I could do, right? So one of them is like verifying say iCloud account for Apple or something like that. That's something that's on my email address. Only I have access to it. Something that only I can do. But then there's other things that's not the best use of my time, to be honest with you. So that's why it gets put on the wayside because doing podcast episodes, going to trade shows, meeting customers, making videos about how to increase your business. These are things that would be more value added for the company, and that's what I engage in, right? But you kind of brought up a good point about metrics. So one of the next component, we talked about vision, we talked about people. The next kind of metric or the next kind of component of the EOS system is data. So, on your perspective, like, if you're running a business, what type of data points would be the most important to run a good aviation business? And how should we, if we're recording it, how frequent do we record it? How frequent do we meet about it? How do we create good business decisions based off the data that we get?
Yeah, I would say this to start. It's the most valuable data is data that you receive that is giving indications of a future result. So that's, the scorecard, which I'm sure you're familiar with. That's our tool in the data component. The scorecard is really weekly um, activity-based measurables that are leading to a future result that matter. So what I always advise is if you look in your business, say, what are the key pieces to our success? Like what has to happen on a regular basis really well for us to say we're doing it right and we would expect to see the successes of that growth, profitability, all that. You start with that, and, you might say something like, "Well, if I'm a flight school, how many, students, consistency of students that are coming into our program, that are going through the program, and that are, eventually getting their certificates and certifications." That's a measurable. But what I would say, that's an end result. So my challenge would be, what are some things you could put on a scorecard that are leading indicators of those results? And so, I didn't do this to set you up in a good way, but I think that there'll be marketing type of metrics that they could put on there to say, are we getting the kind of interest out there and are we getting the kind of inquiries that we need to be able to close enough students that are going to be able to fill that part of our business? That to me is the way to think. So I think the key takeaway here is there's a lot of data out there, and that's part of the problem. There's almost too much data, and with too much data, we get confused and it makes no sense. What we want to look at is go start with what matters in our business and what data can we collect that's going to give us early indications of getting those things accomplished. What are some things that maybe come to your mind as you know this business that are key factors that they need to happen consistently and well?
Yeah, I think for a flight school business or aviation business, I think marketing is one of those leading indicators, not tailing indicators, right? So there's two different types of KPIs you can measure. Um, so this would be like your leads per month. So we for example, Red Rudder marketing, we categorize or we take the data for how many leads we got per month. And this is internal for our stuff. How many sales calls we had per month, number of new clients. For our KPIs, we also do overdue tasks. So this is more of a tail end now, more yeah tail end, and then revenue. So revenue is obviously like the end result. So we do track the end result too. So we track this weekly, daily, and monthly and quarterly.
Do
So
you do you track your close rate?
yes, we do. We
Yeah.
track that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and so that's something that I would suggest for these flight schools, So not only how many leads are coming in, but what are we doing with them, and what legitimately what you should know your business enough to say should be this is a healthy close rate. And they take them through a sales cycle. It's they're coming in and first, who knows what the first step is, but it's usually a phone call and then maybe just getting an idea what the whole process is. And if you want to do it, do a discovery flight. That's early, probably the early side. But every business has that, right? And it starts with marketing, getting the interest in the door. Now, again, I'm not getting paid for this. Maybe I should, but I'm not by saying this. This is just an example, but it's really important because if you're not attracting them into the door, there's really nothing else that's happening.
Yeah,
Nothing else is there.
yeah. I mean, so that's and it's hard for business owners, especially I think if so flight school owners in general, a lot of us are pilots, and they didn't really come from a manufacturing background or a business background. They just, they got their hours in, they maybe flew for the airlines. So they never got exposed to, this type of information, like, data recording, KPIs, marketing. And what happens is what I see in the industry is that they just see the monthly cost of markets. Let's say it's $5,000 a month. Oh, I need to pay $5,000 a month. They're only looking at their overhead. They're not looking at, okay, well, if this can generate me, let's say 200 leads a month or 100 leads a month, and I can get a 20% close ratio for the 10 students that show up in a discovery flight, that's equals to what, like, let's say five students in a month. Um, it's worth it. 5 students a month is easy $50,000 revenue generated for paying 5K. It's that's what it is. But they don't see it. They see it as just the upfront cost. They don't see the actual how they can go into a indicator where they actually drive the revenue up. They're only looking at the sticker price. They're not looking at, what actually am I buying? I'm actually buying a service where my business is being marketed, and then therefore I have leads that come in, and then therefore I have revenue that comes in. They're not really looking at that way because it's kind of intangible. So we try to do our best job with data. So a lot of times it's like we kind of have this like magical like thinking of like marketing just works or it doesn't work, and I just pay this guy and here it is. What the data does now, when you have KPIs, let's say your marketing spend, your cost per lead, your close ratio, your conversion ratio, you're able to then justify and actually record what is your ROI in your investment. And I think that's the most important thing for our customers and also our flight schools, is to understand what is the ROI. Am I getting the students that I need working with Red Rudder or another agency, or am I getting the students I need doing it in house? And I think that's something we need to assess, because a lot of times they don't do the assessment until it's too late. They see, okay, well, I've been bleeding dry for a year. I didn't spend anything on marketing, but now I don't know what to do. And we need to look at that before they get to this point, right? So the idea is, you should invest in marketing and get your business up and running as quick as possible. So data is very important. The next component in the EOS model is, I guess, progress, you can say. So this is
No, process.
processes. So, um,
Yeah, and the next actually, so if you go to the model, I would go, I sort of go
how do
back
you
and forth.
break this down?
So I go vision, people, data, and
Share this
then
up more.
issues, because issues is a big one. Issues is so the issues you see here, the issues list and IDS. IDS stands for identify, discuss, solve. It's a way. It's actually flexing a muscle. It's a skill on how to get efficient at identifying and solving issues, and also opportunities. We have a thing called an issues list, and sometimes it I think it maybe gives it a little bad name because it says, well, everything's bad. But on the issues list, a lot of times can be opportunities, future opportunities. But the issues component just simply is a way to get a discipline around bringing to the table the issues that are significant, and having the ability to legitimately get to the root of it and solve it, even when it's hard, even when it involves people, even when it involves people around the table that you're trying to solve the issue. Because if you're clear about it and you get to the true root of it and you solve it, life is good. You've made a decision that's good for the company. So issue solving is a discipline. And then the process component, and that's just basically saying that there's things we do on a regular basis, and we want to make sure we have the consistency around that. Have we documented the steps in the things that we do on a regular basis? My goodness, running a flight school, I know there's a lot of stuff that's done that needs to consistently happen. Geez, when we fly an airplane, a checklist is part of it's almost like a process, or a checklist could be a tool pulled out in a process. But the bottom line is it's to keep us on track. In the airplane, it's to keep us safe. But process is all about that. And sometimes it's seat of the pants. And that can work for a while. It doesn't work when you start to grow. It just doesn't work. It's too inconsistent. And then that last piece is the traction piece. That's where it all comes together. It's the discipline, it's the accountability. It's the traction that you build to be able to support that vision. And so it basically everything comes together in order for you to feel like you are truly running a business, and you're being true to what you need to do to get it where you need to go. I will sometimes look at an owner and say, are you really serious about this vision? Like when you say you want to um, go 10x in the next 5 years or whatever it is, you really mean that? Because, be careful what you wish for, because you can do it, but it's not necessarily going to be easy. But if you really want to do it, then everything is there to support it. And and this system has all those components to enable you to pick the right kind of stuff. Now, one piece I'll say that you probably are doing that's very important component that we haven't talked about in the traction component is rocks. What are rocks? Rocks are 90-day goals, right? We get in the habit of figuring out the 3 to 7 most important priorities every quarter, and we stay true to them and we stay accountable to them. What's going to happen? You can't help but surround the company with what it needs to be surrounded with to be successful. And from there, issues come out, you solve your issues, and you focus on your rocks. So you see how everything's connected. It's all connected for ultimate success.
I like that. We call them in our company, we call them wings, but yeah, quarterly goals. Quarterly goals every
Yeah.
90 days.
Yeah. You
What I
call
like
them what
about
you want. We call them rocks.
we call them rocks. Um, my old company used to call them rocks too. So
Yeah,
it's not unheard of.
yeah, that's the official
Yeah.
word, that's the first official term in EOS. Part of it is having a common language that everybody knows what you're talking about. So as long as everybody knows what you're talking about, you're good
Yeah, we call them quarterly wings. But anyway,
because you
the
can fly.
what I
Yeah,
like about the quarterly goals is what I do from the vision standpoint. I put a quarterly goal for the company as a whole. So I'll say, hey, my goal for this quarter is to hit, let's say, $100,000 monthly recurring revenue. Okay, sure, whatever. But this is my quarterly goal. Here you go. Boom. Now every single team member has to come up with their own rocks or their own wings and their own quarterly goals. And then basically their goals need to align with my goal, with the company, not my goal, but the company goal. So if the company goal, let's say, is, 20% close ratio or 100,000 revenue this month, then this team member's activity and his quarterly goal has to align to somehow support this overall goal, right? So maybe he's not being in a different department. Maybe we're only talking about sales, but if you're in client delivery, then you need to make sure that you boost the retention. That way we can hit the say $100,000 monthly revenue mark for this quarter. I don't know. Let's say he's in a different department. Let's say he's in rather than sales, maybe they're in finance. Well, then in this case, make sure that we don't, build people incorrectly or something like that. That might be his quarterly goal. Maybe, but it has to somehow align with the company goal. I think it's very important. And we also do that in our company as well. And I think the successful companies I've worked with have this stuff in place, whether it's through EOS or through something else. They have a vision and they have some type of goal, whether it's an annual or quarterly goal or mid-year goal, they try to hit. And then if they work with us, we always review these goals on a quarterly basis as well too. I kind of want to segue back to take a backtrack here to the issues list. So you kind of mentioned you bring this issue list up, and then the senior management team then goes and tries to solve the issues. So a lot of this you call it, I think, IDS: identify, discuss, and solve, right?
that's correct.
I have a different way of thinking of it from my manufacturing days, and we called it like RCA, root cause analysis. A lot of that was let's say the 5 whys. Identifying, let's say there's an issue. I don't know. Let's say a customer left a bad Google review, and then we look at why did he leave a bad Google review? Well, because he didn't fly this day. Why did they say? Oh, well, the planes were down. Why were the planes down? Well, we didn't do the overhaul on time. so
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 you're boiling down to the root, and
yeah,
that's important. You're figuring out when you have confidence about now we got to the real issue. Everything else was a symptom that you noticed that you
right.
talked about, and they were pain points. Like it's painful. They wrote the review. It's painful. They didn't fly. It's painful, painful, painful. It's like now you got to the why. So I like that with the 5 whys. Now, in the context of IDS, now we got the real issue. So the real issue is we didn't have it maintained. And you can even go further. Why? Well, why? Why was that airplane not available? What is it we need to know that we need to solve? And the ideal would be something that if we solve it now, it goes away forever. It doesn't come up again because we got to the root. We got as deep as we needed to. And then there's the accountability. So we've decided what it is. Well, okay, that's great. Who's doing what? And how are we going to hold the accountability around that? Because that's sometimes where it leaks. Hey, we figured it all out. We're real happy with ourselves. A month down the road, it happens again. What happened? There was a leak. Someone didn't do something, or maybe we didn't catch all of what the real issue was, but something there leaked. And we gotta contain it and say, we don't want leaks. We want to just keep this baby solid so we can keep on doing the real stuff. Have airplanes available when people want them and fulfill the demand that we're creating. That's what we're trying to do, right? But it's not an ideal world. Obviously, these things happen. What we're trying to do is get real about the things that are just continuing shooting ourselves in the foot. That there's no place for that, right? We can only blame ourselves for that.
Yeah. So you find the issue, you get the root cause, and then what you do is after you solve it, you create a document or a process. Create a document or process to solve it,
If that's the solve,
if that's the solve, right?
right? And
Then
a
I
lot of times it is.
And ideally, if you have procedures in place, then when you hire it's all coming together now. So when you have, let's say, the issue, you solve the issue, you create an SOP for this now. What happens now is, let's say you hire someone else that's new to your team. Then ideally, through the training process, if you've already built these procedures, they can just review this, and then the issue doesn't hopefully occur again.
Yes, and
Ideally,
here's where there can be leaks. we got a great process, but we fell short on the training. So we just said, here's the process, do it. And all of a sudden you see people are maybe doing a little bit differently and you realize, maybe there's a little bit more to this. We've got to be more intentional about making sure people are trained, they're doing it our way, and they're getting the results. But you're surrounding it. You see that? So that's what I like about this conversation, because what we're saying is there's nowhere to hide. Like, we're gonna find that. We're gonna find, you're not gonna hide because I'm gonna get you. And that's what we're doing. We're surrounding all those issues that are holding us back.
What is the you mentioned training, and I think that's something that in my corporate life they beat the hell out of me with this training stuff. So I used to work in quality assurance, and like quality assurance and like ISO 5000, whatever we call it SQF, Safe Quality Foods, HACCP. There are certain requirements on a legal standpoint for training. I know the same thing for aviation. But we had to make sure that our employees were trained on a yearly basis, at least, on certain topics like food safety, on site security, on these things. So, and then if we were not able to present documentation to the auditor that showed that our employees were trained, then we would miss points. Then eventually, if you miss so many points, you can't sell your product to the market. What is the best way to train team members when you're building a team? That's a very open-ended question.
Oh yeah, there's a snap question. Well, best way to teach them or to train them. I look, here's the thing I'll say around training. It's first realizing that sometimes where I think things fall short is people that are putting in place procedures know these things really well, and to them it's like a no-brainer. I got it written down, just follow it, just do it. Like, you don't have to be, a brain surgeon for this. But the thing that I think that is probably the area that is most vulnerable is understanding what training looks like in your organization, who should be trained when and how. Those are things you need to figure out ahead of time. And, I also believe you don't wanna overtrain. It's like if someone doesn't have to be, training could be as simple as, 15 minutes, reviewing something. So it's being clear about what training is, and then how you're validating over time that that training has worked, and that the actual, implementation of what you want them trained on is happening. So I don't think that there is one, here's the magic, and I don't think you were asking that, but basically, guideline for training. I think the important thing is to say, where does training belong in our company? Do we need to be proactive, not reactive? And we know in things that are obvious, like in aviation, we know we need to be trained to fly an airplane. Like, no one's going to question that. It's like, get training and then show you can do it proficient. And then you get a certificate that says you can continue to be trained, right? That's a no brainer. The things that are not so obvious are the ones that really shoot you in the foot, because these are the things where we got that, what I'm calling the leakage, where all of a sudden things are getting sloppy and we're not getting the results that we want. So only the things that people need to be trained on. But I would just say it always comes back to, what are the most important things that we're delivering to get where we need to go? And how are we delivering that? And who's involved with that? And how consistent are we in how and the way we do that? And then training fits in there somewhere. And you just got to figure out what your standard procedure is for training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's not just like, training for pilot stuff, I mean, turns around a point, whatever S turns, it's not just that. We're talking about training for all employees for your business to run the business correctly. So this could even be something as simple as how to answer the phone. When someone walks in, what do we do with this person? After a flight, for post flight, what are the steps from, landing to putting the plane away? Make sure you wipe the the glass, um, buckle the seatbelts back up, right? So it's not hanging out the door, things like that.
I hate that.
There's this, I'll tell you the side story here. So there was a school I was talking to. This was a few years back. Rented the plane, whatever, Cessna 172. The seat on the passenger side had the seatbelt hanging out, and the renter didn't see it. So he took off, and then the seatbelt was doing one of these things, and it was like $20,000 worth of damage. so, so
Yeah, and we're gonna step back and say, so what part of the walk around did you do or not
yeah,
do?
So
right? But
did you
this is
follow the
part of the
procedure,
process,
the,
right?
the
Right.
checklist?
And that's got to be, what I can only imagine the feeling of that student once they got airspeed. And I don't know if they heard it before they took off, but they probably heard clank, 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 clank. And then once they're up, and they're like, first probably thinking, what the heck is going on? Maybe figured out that there's a seatbelt missing, and perhaps it was that. But that's got to be a terrible feeling. But that's an example. Look, I'm going to even go simplistic, even this simple. Getting you probably wouldn't look at it this way, but you guys have a process. I know you'd look at it this way. You have a process for doing these podcasts. And I know from the touch points I got from you and Sam, right?
Yeah.
Sam, right?
Sam, maybe
That
Raul.
you have a process, right, with a guest to try and set them up and make sure that they're ready and they can come on, they got the link and all that. And that process was followed, and it kind of helped me in a way. I was trained like, oh, this is how they do it, and I want to make sure I get on here early enough. I got on here early because I want to make sure I didn't have any technical issues. But that's a part of training. In a way, you were training me
Yeah.
on how to do the podcast, right? And very subtle. So I'd even put that under that heading. There was some training that went on, and you do it consistently, and it's part of your process.
We have a procedure actually for podcasts. So like how to communicate to prospects for getting on the show, sending them the link, and then sending them some material, and then after the show, what do we do after the show? How do we syndicate it out? How do we close it up? How do we do this? So procedures for everything. Write them up. I know it takes a lot of time. Build it over time. So we have Red Rudder's been in business for about 4 years. We only have about like 100 procedures written up. And this is contrary to my old job in the factory. We had thousands of procedures. We had procedures of how to clean a meat slicer, how to wash the floor, how to open the door. It's like how to talk to your boss. I don't know. We had procedures for everything. And it's something that we need to do. That way we are able to train people, we're able to scale the company up and we're able to grow. Okay, just to kind of wrap everything up here, this is we've been talking about EOS for a little minute. Randy is a EOS implementer. Can I want to give you the last 5 minutes of this show just to talk a little bit about your business, how you help businesses grow, and what do you want to tell the world as far as call to actions, and what if someone wants to work with you, what should they do next?
I think we just have a conversation. I mean, essentially, right now, if we were to take a snapshot, I'm running on capacity, but I have a great network of EOS implementers that I'm more than happy to refer. I also love to do the one-on-one with the visionaries and with the integrators because I feel those are the two most understood uh, positions in an EOS run company, right? They're not understood as well as they should be. And so I have an opportunity to do coaching, and I like that. And as I said earlier, the third thing is, and these are for businesses that truly have people that are moving into mid-management. This mid-managers program, I'm very excited about it. We launched it yesterday. These folks are in cohorts. They're going to go for 6 months. They're going through 8 modules with lessons inside them. And I'm very excited about it because I think what it's doing is it's setting people up for higher management. So not only be solid mid-managers, but be suited for executive management. That's what I do. The two areas that would probably be the most obvious would be my website, bluecoreleadership.com. I love that. I could just say it and it just flips up there. I just love this world. Bluecoreleadership.com. And then the other area where people connect with me is LinkedIn. Those are the two pieces that are most prevalent. And for me, it's just have a conversation. And if I can't help you directly, I'm in the business to help, and I want to, get you in the right direction. And of course, if your audience in the aviation industry, it's just, more fun for me as well. So there's my 2.5 minute pitch.
I do think that this is a real. I wouldn't have Randy or anyone. I wouldn't be talking about EOS if I didn't believe in it. I did a webinar about 4 months ago about this system. I'm glad to have an actual EOS implementer on the show here to talk about it. If you are a business owner, if you've hit the wall already, you've scaled up and you're trying to get to the next step, I highly recommend checking out EOS. Go to Randy's LinkedIn, go to his website, check him out, and I'll do a small call to action as we end here too. If you're a flight school and you're looking to help your marketing aspect of it, I'm part of a company called Red Rudder Marketing. They're the hosts of this show. We do marketing for flight schools and aviation businesses. We've helped schools all across the country go from, a few $100,000 to multiple seven figures, all within a year and 2 years. Give us a call, 314-804-1200. Again, this is Tim with the Aviation Business Podcast. We are so happy to have Randy on here. And if you're listening from wherever, we hope to see you guys next time. So see you guys around, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Awesome.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Tim.